Tonight on Mid-Maryland Votes, we sit down with Republican gubernatorial candidate John Myrick. Maryland is drowning in deficits while families face higher costs, taxes, and crime. We're pressing him on how he plans to fix the budget, support law enforcement, empower parents in school, and make life more affordable for all Marylanders. No fluff, straight answers. John Myrick joins us now. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me, as always, is my friend and co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we have a very special guest tonight. We have John Myrick, who is the candidate for governor of Maryland. John, thank you so much for being on the program tonight.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me on.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm a Marylander, unlike our governor. I am a Marylander. Grew up in Harford County. My family's been here in Maryland since about 1640. I went to Maryland public schools, again, unlike our current governor. So I got a halfway decent education up in the Harford County public school system. Started out my career in Harford County as a deputy sheriff for a few years, patrolling the streets and keeping people safe. Moved over to the federal side of the house and was a federal intelligence officer and counterintelligence agent for 30 years. Protecting Marylanders and Americans far away from home. While I did that, I spent 23 years in the Air Force Reserve. I flew for 10 of that, served in combat on 5 different continents. I am a combat decorated veteran. And again, unlike our governor, I actually can account for every one of my combat decorations. Retired from the federal government in 2013. I've been consulting for them for the Departments of Homeland Security, Justice, and I guess now the Department of War since then on national security matters.
Well, one question I do have is in regards to what you mentioned, being a decorated combat veteran. I mean, all 3 of us are veterans, and those medals that are earned are a point of honor and commitment, and they have deep meaning. So in regards to the controversy with Governor Moore and that medal, do you know where the controversy stems from?
My understanding is he was originally recommended for a Bronze Star during his service in Afghanistan while he was there back in, I believe it was 2006, 2007 timeframe. My understanding is that he was denied that award. He not only placed or mentioned that he had been awarded the Bronze Star on an application to the White House, but he has continued over the next 19 years to claim that he had received the Bronze Star, or at least not to correct the error, though he knew he hadn't received it. He only recently received it. My understanding was it was awarded to him by someone who had risen to the rank where they could actually sign off on that award, who had served with him in Afghanistan at the time. So he received that award 19 years after serving in the combat zone. For those of us who have served, like you gentlemen, you know that when you're given a military decoration, you're presented orders, you're presented a certificate, a citation, and the certificate as well. And it goes on your 214, your DD 214. There's no mistaking whether or not you have a medal. You don't accidentally think that you've got a medal that was never awarded to you in the military. And for him just simply not to come out and own that mistake, and I will characterize it as a mistake in deference to his current position, is not only disingenuous, but I feel it's an insult to all of those of us who have served in uniform, and especially those of us who have served in combat zones.
John, Maryland currently faces a multi-billion-dollar deficit, while states around Maryland are operating on surpluses. If you're given the chance to be governor of the state, what is your solution to this problem?
Oh, and that's a great question. And you've pointed out a major problem here in Maryland, especially under the Moore administration. I will preface this with the fact that this is not a partisan issue. I will take Pennsylvania as an example. It's run by a Democratic governor, Governor Shapiro. Pennsylvania has twice as many people as Maryland does. It has 13 million people. Maryland has 6.2 million. Covers 3 times the land area. So it has 3 times the road infrastructure. Pennsylvania's budget this year is $51 billion. Maryland's budget is $67 billion. The state of Pennsylvania provides services to twice as many residents in an area 3 times our size for $16 billion less a year. So this is not a partisan issue. It's a competence issue. It's a spending issue. One of the very first things we will do once elected is I will implement a line by line accounting of every tax dollar spent here in Maryland, because it is clear that there must be fraud, waste, and abuse going on, just like it is at the federal level. After spending 30 years in federal government, gentlemen, I have seen fraud, waste, and abuse at the galactic scale. And I know it occurs at the state level as well. Where we find waste, we will cut that waste. Where we find fraud, we will prosecute it, because no one is going to steal Marylanders' hard-earned money on my watch. Exercising fiscal restraint is paramount to restoring prosperity to Maryland. You live within a budget every month. I live within a budget every month. When you don't overspend, and if you do, there are consequences. Unfortunately, our state government forgot a very long time ago that the money they're spending is your tax dollars and mine, not theirs. We deserve to have that money spent on priorities that affect Marylanders the most. And right now, quite frankly, they're not. There's no way you can explain to me where $67 billion is going when our neighboring state, as you said, both Pennsylvania, actually all three, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia, are all operating as a surplus.
Even
And
Delaware, sir. Even
yeah,
Delaware has got a surplus.
right. And 2 of those states have much larger populations than we do. You know, part of this too is in the state, the size of Maryland state government. Most people don't realize there are 22 separate Maryland departments at the state level, and 54 independent agencies. Now, the entire federal government runs on 13 departments. So are you seriously telling me we need 9 more departments to run the state of Maryland than we do to run the federal government? State employees are another big expenditure, obviously. Again, I'll use Pennsylvania as an example. Pennsylvania provides all the services we've talked about. They have 70,000 state employees. Maryland has 122,000 state employees. So again, do you mean to tell me that we need 52,000 more people working for the state government than a state with twice our population?
All of these budgets, et cetera, that you're referring to, they have real life consequences. I mean, not
Absolutely.
only have they now caused record levels amounts of tax and fee increases, we've had our credit score as a state was lowered, which makes everything in Maryland now more expensive for that reason alone, along with the taxes. But something that doesn't get talked about very often, Marylanders are one of the only states in the country, one of 5 states in the country, where our average income is dropping. The last year that was recorded by the federal government, the average Marylander's income dropped by over 5%. And for 17 years before that, Maryland was one of the largest, fastest growing incomes on average in the country. One of the biggest pits, so to speak, where the money goes is, of course, the spending on the public schools, the blueprint for Maryland's future, which, of course, sounds great, but there's a very, very controversial for many people. What are your thoughts on that blueprint for Maryland's future?
The blueprint is an abomination, quite frankly. When it was introduced, even Governor Hogan realized that it was not a sustainable plan. Everybody wants good public schools. Don't get me wrong. Again, I'm a product of the Maryland public school system. The problem is you can't bankrupt the state to do it. Maryland right now spends more than 37 other states in the union per capita on education every year. We spend across the state an average of just under $20,000 per student. But our 4th and 8th graders do math and read at below the national average on a consistent basis. Now, that is not a good return on the investment. And you do not continue to throw good money after bad into a failed system. And I'll use Baltimore City's school system as an example. The numbers came out last week. They were in the Baltimore Sun that indicated that Baltimore was celebrating the fact that their eighth graders went from 7% reading proficiency to 9% reading proficiency at grade level. That means 91% of Baltimore City eighth graders cannot read at eighth grade level. And they were celebrating that. This is a school system that pays their superintendent 3 times what the governor makes. She's paid $445,000 a year. And Baltimore has the second worst performing school system in the country. And where did that superintendent that is running Baltimore schools come from? Detroit, the worst performing school system in the country. So why are we celebrating a 2% increase in reading proficiency when 91% of our students can't read at grade level? You know, a Maryland high school diploma is absolutely worthless if a student can't read it. And no Maryland business wants to hire a Maryland high school graduate who can't make change for $1. That's one of the exact reasons why I chose as my lieutenant governor running mate, Dr. Brenda J. Cham. You've interviewed Dr. Cham. Brenda is an incredible lady.
Amazing woman.
Amazing woman. A public school teacher. She teaches special education in Washington County. She's been doing that for 30 years. Holds a PhD in special education leadership. A former state legislator. The first African-American woman ever to serve in the Maryland General Assembly as a Republican in history. This is an accomplished, dedicated public servant. Brenda and I are not politicians. We are public servants. I've served Maryland in this country as a public servant my entire adult life. And the difference is politicians talk about problems. Public servants solve them.
Another thing that brings us to, you're talking about Baltimore, and there's some serious crime issues in the state of Maryland. What is the balance between social programs, supporting law enforcement, your stance on cooperation with ICE? What is your overall feeling on crime and reductions in Maryland, especially in our big urban centers?
You know, crime and crime reduction is an area that's near and dear to my heart as a former law enforcement officer here in Maryland myself. And it requires a comprehensive approach. It requires an approach that couples effective law enforcement with working with the courts and with the state's attorneys to prosecute the offenders, and reforming things such as our absolutely broken juvenile justice system. And it requires cooperation. As far as cooperating with ICE, I am a strong proponent for cooperation with federal authorities. Under federal law, we have an obligation to cooperate with federal authorities. And Maryland's refusal to cooperate with federal authorities, especially ICE, is costing Maryland and Maryland taxpayers big. Last year, according to the best available data, Marylanders spent $2.9 billion taxpayer dollars providing services to unlawful aliens. $2.9 billion. Now, we're going to lose more federal resources as a result of Governor Moore's refusal to modify his sanctuary policies. And we're already seeing that effect. The FBI headquarters was supposed to move about 3 miles from my house here into Greenbelt. 29,000 federal jobs, billions of dollars of tax revenue gone. Why? Because what federal law enforcement office or agency is going to place its headquarters smack in the middle of a sanctuary county that refuses to cooperate with federal law enforcement? It's a ridiculous proposition. No wonder they said no. And we continue to lose the money, federal dollars. And we have a governor who has publicly said he will not and cannot work with this administration. That's ridiculous. The federal government is Maryland's largest employer. About 270,000 Marylanders get their jobs directly from the federal government now. And we keep hemorrhaging those jobs. Why? Because this governor will not work with the federal government. You know, we've lost the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. They were supposed to move from DC to Beltsville, Maryland. That was a $1.9 billion project, canceled. We've mentioned the FBI headquarters. We're scheduled to lose nearly 20,000 jobs out of NIH in Bethesda. They're now talking about shutting down the USDA's Agricultural Research Center in Beltsville, which has been there for 100 years. That's 3,000 more federal jobs. And the hits just keep coming. If you are not willing to work with your largest employer, then you need to get out of the way and let somebody who can do the job. I've worked in Democrat White Houses. I've worked in Republican White Houses. I can and will work with anyone to benefit Maryland. And when it comes to law enforcement, if that means putting National Guard troops to supplement local police departments in jurisdictions throughout Maryland, then that's what should happen. If it means cooperating with ICE, that should happen. I will work with the legislature to end the sanctuary jurisdictions here in Maryland, because I personally think that they violate federal law, causing Maryland to hemorrhage more federal resources that we cannot afford to lose. That's what people don't understand. You know, some of us have been in Maryland long enough to remember when we passed the legislation to have a Maryland state lottery. I'm sure you gentlemen remember that. Where was that money supposed to go? Do you recall?
Was it the schools?
Public schools,
Yeah.
and public safety. It was supposed to go to both of those. Now, last year, the Maryland State Lottery brought in $1.6 billion tax dollars into the coffers of Maryland. Do you know how much of that went to public schools and public safety?
Zero.
Zero. $1.6 billion went into the general fund. And these are not my numbers. These are coming directly from the comptroller of the state of Maryland's their website. When we passed the legislation for casino gambling, where was that money supposed to go?
Same
Public
areas.
schools, public safety. $841 million last year. Where did it go? The general fund. Cannabis revenue, $41 million last year to the general fund. We're already over $2.5 billion worth of money that was supposed to go to public safety and public schools, which didn't go there. The money's there. It just needs to be reprogrammed to where it's lawfully supposed to be. And we would be able to supplement this. I hear that complaint across the state from chiefs of police and sheriffs that I talk to all over our state, that if it weren't for the lack of funding, they would be able to do much better at law enforcement. The money's there. It's a matter of reprogramming it. And who does that? The governor. The governor is responsible for building the budget. And this governor has abjectly failed at that task.
John, you mentioned education multiple times, and I agree with you 100%. The education system needs to come up. One aspect of the education system I'd like to get your opinion on is parental rights. Right now, they're a huge battle between the school boards and the parents on what's going in the curriculum, what their children have to attend, and so forth. There was recently a Supreme Court decision, Mahmood versus Taylor,
The Mahmood case. Yes.
which went very, very well for parents. What's your overall take on that situation? And if you're elected, what would you do to help parents out?
Well, both Brenda and I are huge proponents for parental rights. I actually wrote a brief in support of the Mahmood case that went before the Supreme Court, in support of the parents in that case. The Supreme Court said long ago, 100 years ago, as a matter of fact, that parenting is a fundamental right. And as such, in order to curb that right in any way, you have to have a compelling reason. And quite frankly, the efforts of school boards and the Maryland Board of Education, and quite frankly, the Maryland House of Delegates, the supermajority in the House of Delegates, who tried to take parental rights away again this year in the General Assembly, is ridiculous. Parents have the absolute right to decide what is appropriate for their children to be taught in public schools. When I went to public schools, when you were being taught a controversial subject such as sex education, you had to get a parental permission slip signed before you could even go into the classroom. And if not, you went to an alternate class that time. No harm, no foul. Why that is such a big problem nowadays is beyond me. The Supreme Court in the Mahmoud case clearly stated opting out based on religious or moral objections is the exclusive right of the parent. And we will enforce that decision here in Maryland when I am governor. Brenda and I are also huge proponents for having the money follow the students. Again, because we are working with a failed public school system right now. That's not a surprise to anyone that would be listening. But Maryland taxpayers pay a huge amount of money into the public school system every year. And if that school is failing your child, you have a responsibility to take your child out and to either send them to public or private school or to homeschool them yourself. And those come with costs. And those parents should not have to foot the cost of that and also pay into a public school system that failed their child to begin with. So we want to see tax credits. And I talked about this in Kent County last night with some of the delegates from the House of Delegates present who agree that we need to work on implementing a tax credit for parents that move their child to a private school or who homeschool their children in lieu of a failing public school system until we can rebuild the schools. And what that will do is that will spark competition. And competition always sparks improvement or abject failure. Either way, the student wins. And Maryland wins.
You're going to battle the teachers' unions on that one, John. The
Indeed, I
teachers'
will.
unions basically came out, and their opinion on Mahmoud was that parents have no business being in a child's curriculum.
Well, with all due respect to the teachers union couldn't be more wrong, and the United States Supreme Court agrees with that position.
Another issue is that with the cost of living in Maryland, specifically utilities, we've had an issue where the percentage of people that are unable to pay their utility bills is climbing. It appears to be getting close to 20%. Baltimore BG&E announced that they may end up having brownouts and blackouts throughout the summer, and that actually started happening. Where is that coming from, in your opinion, and what is the solution?
Well, it's not even my opinion. PJM, the company that oversees the electric distribution throughout the Mid-Atlantic region, recently came out with numbers saying that since Governor Moore took office, electric costs in Maryland have increased by 1,012%. 1,012%. And they directly attributed that to Governor Moore's his green energy initiatives with closing down fossil fuel burning plants and their insistence on wind and solar. Now, again, I am a proponent for being a good shepherd of our environment. This is Maryland, for God's sake. We have the bay, the mountains, the sea. The environment's a huge, huge benefit to Maryland, and it needs to be protected. But it can't be protected on the backs of Marylanders, which is what's happening right now. Right now, Marylanders import 40% of our electricity, and we import that from Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia. Guess how they produce electricity? Fossil fuels. Exactly. This little thing called coal. Maybe you've heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
And natural gas. So they can charge us whatever they want, and they have. We also have a Public Service Commission who is supposed to oversee these rate increases, who has absolutely failed at their job. Last August, 13 months ago, BG&E went before the Public Service Commission and requested a $500 million rate increase. And they rubber stamped it without asking one single question. Not one. Now, who appoints the Public Service Commission, gentlemen?
Governor.
The governor. So do you not think there'll be a new Public Service Commission? We need to protect Marylanders as well. Wind and solar, while promising technologies, are not mature enough to supply energy for Maryland's needs. And Governor Moore heard that during his trip to Asia, his $322,000 trip to Asia a few months ago, when Asian businessmen told him that they could not put their manufacturing facilities here in Maryland because our power infrastructure would not support them. These are simple solutions. None of the things I'm talking about are complicated. None of them are beyond repair. It only takes common sense and a governor who cares enough to do the job to make these things happen.
So if voters give you 4 years, John, what's at the end of that 4 years, what's going to be the single biggest accomplishment that you're going to be able to point to, you think?
Quite frankly, I think the single biggest accomplishment will be turning the ship off of the rocks, because right now Maryland is heading for the shoreline, and we're heading there fast. Now I will not be able to fix every problem that Maryland faces overnight. Maryland did not get messed up overnight. It is not going to get fixed overnight. But we can right the course. We can put Maryland on a path towards economic prosperity, towards educational prosperity, and towards public safety that will make Maryland a model for every other state in the union. And that will be the single proudest thing I can do as governor of Maryland. Governors a long time ago here forgot that they work for the people. They work for you and I. Right now, if you call the governor's office, you don't even get to talk with a human being. You get a voicemail, you get a recording, and you get told you have to leave a message that never gets returned. As governor, so be it. I will take the call because I work for Maryland. But having worked in Washington, D.C. and worked up on the Hill for the Department of Defense at the time, I got my fill of politicians, quite frankly. And I have very little use for politicians. Public servants are a different matter, obviously. I'm doing this because good people can no longer sit back on the sidelines and expect things to change without getting in the game. And as a Marylander, we have a stake in this fight. This is home. And I will not be run out of my home, and nor should you, gentlemen, or anyone else listening, by bad leadership and poor decisions. We can fix this. None of these problems are unsolvable. And every Marylander is suffering under these problems. I hear this every day. I mean, we were at the Prince George's County Fair this weekend, and it doesn't get a whole lot more Democrat than Prince George's County, where I live here. We had every person that came up to the booth in the 4 days we were there was angry, and they were angry about the same things everybody else is. The largest tax increase in Maryland history, 300 new taxes and fees, more money coming out of their pockets, bad public schools, unsafe streets, potholes that'll swallow an SUV. All of these things affect every single Marylander, regardless of your political affiliation. And every Marylander deserves better. We all deserve a governor and a government, a state government, who was responsive and who will work for Marylander. And we lost that a long time ago here. We can get it back because Maryland's worth saving.
You mentioned a point. You were in PG County, a heavily Democratic county. What is your plan on winning the Democrats and the independent votes that you're going to need to be governor of the state of Maryland?
Meeting Marylanders where they are and meeting Democratic voters where they are. Listening to their concerns, because Maryland, I'm not going to be a Republican governor. I'm going to be the governor of all Maryland. Republican, unaffiliated, Democrat, doesn't matter. Marylanders deserve a voice, and Marylanders deserve a governor who remembers that the state doesn't end at the Bay Bridge or South Mountain. We've done meet and greets in churches, in Democratic areas, in mosques, in synagogue. All Marylanders' voices matter. We are meeting Marylanders where they are. I don't need to win every Democrat vote. What I need is to win enough Democrat votes of the people who are fed up and who are being priced out of the state of Maryland and who are angry, because this governor is that every day he is in office, he is the gift that keeps on giving for the Republican Party, because he has not made a right decision or told the truth since he's been elected. And even Democrats are tired of that. And independents are tired of that. Make no mistake, 2026 is our election to win. And if we do not right this ship, we will hit those rocks under another Moore administration. And by 2030, there may not be a Maryland recognizable enough to salvage.
Well, John, we thank you so much for being with us tonight. We've learned so much from you. We wish you the best of luck. You and Brenda both are excellent public servants, different from politicians. And also the fact that you celebrate the diversity of Maryland. It really is our strength.
It absolutely is. Maryland's strength is in our diversity, and that can't be denied, and it can't be minimized, because this is the best state in the union, and I will be honored, truly honored, to serve as Maryland's next governor.
Well, good luck in that endeavor, and thank you again for being with us. My name is Mark Flynn. This is Mid-Maryland Votes. My co-host is
Ethan Lowen.
And we thank John Myrick for being here and wish him good luck as a candidate for governor of Maryland. Thank you so much. That was Republican candidate for governor John Myrick answering some tough questions on Maryland's budget, crime, schools, and affordability. The stakes are high and every voter deserves clear plans. This is Mid-Maryland Votes, where talking points end and accountability begins. Like, follow, and share for more content like this, and we'll see you next time on Mid-Maryland Votes.